Many of you know that in the Woolley House we are featuring 2 exhibits on Asbury Park. And those of you who don't know, we welcome you to the museum, which is in front of the Ocean Library on Deal Road, to see for yourselves the major exhibit, Asbury Park, the History of a Jersey Gem, and a mini exhibit on remembering Asbury High. Tonight, we're extending our celebration of Asbury Park, and we're going to delve into its music scene. From Arthur Pryor, that trombone virtuoso who entertained hundreds of thousands of guests on the Asbury Boardwalk the first decades of the 20th century, to those hot and happening West Side jazz clubs, to the mid-century rock and roll concerts, to Bruce Springsteen, to today's music venues, Asbury Park has incubated and showcased top-notch musicians. And tonight on our panel, we have 3 of them, all Asbury Park native sons, who are here to share with us their memories of what it was like to be a musical prodigy in a city that's known for its music. And moderating our panel discussion tonight is Jon Leidersdorff. If I do say so myself, it's the perfect choice. Jon himself is a professional musician and music producer. He has a distinguished resume known in rock circles. He is also the mastermind behind and the owner of the Lakehouse on Wesley Lake in Asbury. The Lakehouse is a music academy. It gives instruction, both group and individual, to enthusiasts from toddlers, including my grandchildren, to seniors, including my husband. It is also a professional space for rehearsal and for recording. The Lakehouse also has a program that it calls Play It Forward, where it raises money for music scholarships for at-risk children in the community. So by virtue of his vocation and his avocation, Jon brings to us a professional perspective and a fresh look at the subject tonight. And by situating his business in Asbury Park, I think he's doing his part to show the rest of the world that Asbury Park is alive and well and still a Jersey gem. So with that, please welcome our panel and Jon Leidersdorff.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Peggy. I'd, of course, like to thank everyone for allowing me to participate in this, and Peggy for volunteering and making events like this possible. So it's a wonderful thing, and I didn't expect to see so many people. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to also now introduce our distinguished guests, and all, like Peggy said, from Asbury Park, and spent a lot of years in Asbury Park. First, we'll start with Gladstone Trott, known as an organ virtuoso, multi-instrumentalist. And as he just told me, 44 years at St. Augustine's Episcopalian, where he is the organist, choir master, musical director. And a member of the Asbury Park graduating class of 1975. And next we have Clifford Johnson, known as a distinguished businessman, born and raised in Asbury Park, still here in the area. Supposed to be a wicked alto sax musician, so can't wait to hear you guys play. I'm hoping that maybe we can coax him to play this evening. Son of a music teacher, Clifford Johnson. A member of the Asbury Park graduating class of 1943.
That's right.
And Dorian Parreott, who is the former supervisor of fine arts in Asbury Park, also a multi-instrumentalist, has taught all over the East Coast. We're going to ask him if he's still teaching, which I bet he is, and a member of the Asbury Park graduating class of 1954, Dorian Parreott. So thank you very much for being here. And the theme tonight is remembering the West Side music scene, which I'm very interested in hearing about. I myself didn't start, I graduated from Frito Borough in 1986, and as soon as I graduated, I ran to Asbury Park and got a place to live and started playing in the most decrepit bars in the worst time to be in Asbury Park from what I understand. So I'm very, very curious, and I think a lot of people here are curious to hear about the West Side music scene. And maybe someone could take us back there and just start to give us a little bit of a picture of what was happening.
We're going to turn it over to our youngest member, Clifford Johnson.
Yeah, I'm the youngest. You know, I lived one block off of Springwood Avenue. I lived on Ridge Avenue in Asbury Park. And living so close to Springwood Avenue and being such a concerned person about music, because my mother was a music teacher, and I remember being able to, whenever my parents would allow me to, I would sneak over to the avenue. There were clubs on just about on every block, sometimes in between. If you're familiar with Asbury Park and Neptune at all, if you go down Highway 35 and you turn onto Springwood Avenue, the first cross street is Drummond Avenue. On the corner of Drummond and Springwood, there was a place called Big Bill's. That was a nightclub, and I was fortunate enough to play the opening at that particular nightclub. You came up a little bit, you crossed Myrtle Avenue, and when you got between Myrtle and Ridge, on the left side going towards Main Street, there was a place called Palm Gardens. First-class entertainers came there all the time. Across the street from that was a place called the Two Door, and it was a bar and music lounge. On the next corner was a place called Paradise Hall. It was a dance hall upstairs over top of a gas station. I think it was a gas station. It was something underneath. I can't remember. It was up on the second level. It used to have dances up there. Big bands used to come from the city. I can remember Count Basie's band coming there. I can remember Duke Ellington's band coming there. And I would stand there and look at these guys playing, and I would say, oh boy, if I could do that. And then going down a little further on Springwood Avenue. Now I'm only a few blocks so far. Going down just a little bit further, we came to the Capitol. That was a bar and grill, I believe. Then next to that, walk about maybe 2 or 3 doors down from the Capitol, was a place called the Turf Lounge. That building is still there, by the way. Just off of the Springwood Avenue, there was the Asbury Park Elks. And what I'd like to mention to all of you here tonight is that all of these places had live musicians frequently, every weekend. Went further down Springwood Avenue, you would come to Cuba's nightclub on the north side. On the south side, there was the State Ballroom, where there's another big place where bands used to come all the time. And then further down Springwood Avenue, all this on Springwood Avenue, there was the Savoy Bar and Grill. Another club, they had a bar in the front and a nightclub in the back. Further down Springwood Avenue, there was Madonna's. And I think there's something here that hardly anybody even knows, even my co-musician friends. There used to be a place on Railroad Avenue you hear of the Cotton Club, and everybody thinks there's only a Cotton Club only in New York City. There was a Cotton Club in Asbury Park. It was if you know where the railroad tracks, where the station is, there just before you get to the station off of Springwood Avenue, there are a group of stores there. Well, years ago, there was a club there called the Cotton Club. It didn't last very long, but there was a club there called the Cotton Club, and I know most of you perhaps didn't know that, but you've heard the Cotton Club of New York City, I'm sure. But anyway, so there's music and music everywhere. And I just want to say that being the son of a music teacher, one of the reasons why I play saxophone today and yesterday is because my mother was a music teacher, and she was teaching me how to play piano. And every time I would reach for a chord and hit the wrong note, she had a baton, and she would snap my knuckle. So I knew then and there I had to learn how to play something that she couldn't teach me. So in any event, I just want you folk to know that music was everywhere on Springwood Avenue, and I had the privilege of playing in every one of those spots that I mentioned to you.
I don't know if I can add to that. You know, some of those places I couldn't go because my father was a police officer in Asbury Park. He said, "You'll be home at 9 o'clock." Yeah. But I too had the opportunity to perform in those places, the Capitol, at the Elks, Madonna's. So again, we used to play in the village, the Asbury Park Village, when I was a youngster. I was about 15, 17 years old. And I had a 14-piece jazz band. It was actually more Latin than jazz. So we played Latin jazz music in the Asbury Park Village. We played for dances and parties. And I played, I think I was 16 at that time. And I played for my sister and my cousin's wedding. That was at the St. Stephen's A.M. Zion Church, and also at Second Baptist. They got married on the same day, so we had a good time. Just to talk about, you know, how you learn, how do you get involved with music. I started earlier as a youngster. I had no choice. I had to go to church every day, every Sunday, and we learned to sing. We played music in the church, and it really started me interested in the music. I had an uncle who played and traveled all over the world. My uncle George Fauntleroy. He also went to Asbury Park High School, and I think it was back in 1940. So yeah, it was before Cliff. And he used to come down and bring his instrument and play, and I heard that saxophone sound, and I said, "Wow, this is great," you know. But I also was into the rhythms, and so I was actually trained in the elementary school with Frank Bryan, who was former band director at Asbury Park High School. And he used to go to the grade schools and teach the youngsters how to play. And so I would play the drums with him in the afternoon, and then he would say, "You know, Dorian, I need a alto saxophone player." And I used to take the book home, learn it, read the parts, and come back, and I was ready to sit in with the band there. I also played French horn, and I played drums, and I sang in the choir there at the high school. So I really was inundated with the music with a great guy. He was tremendous. He really cared about the kids at that particular time, and he also taught lessons there in the community on the west side. So he was a great guy, and I had the privilege to take his place like 30, 40 years later, and came to Asbury Park after going around a little bit. I taught in North Carolina for 2 years, Then I came back to New Jersey because I was making some big money in North Carolina. They told me, if you stay, you'll make $4,000 a year. So I was getting paid once a year, $3,200 a year. So I said, well, I think it's time to go back home. So I came back home, and there was nothing to be had at that time back in the 60s. Came back in 1960. And so I went to Newark, and I started studying instrument repair. Here again, I'm into the field of music. And I made some contacts with some of the traveling musicians, and they introduced me to a school up in Mount Arlington, New Jersey. Anybody from Mount Arlington? Okay. It's way out west of New Jersey, off of Route 10. And so I taught there for 1 year. But that 1 year was really tremendous. I started there, and the superintendent and principal was the same. And he said, Charlie told me, he said, there's some lessons out in the community, because I was only teaching 1 day a week. And so before the year was out, I had 15 students, and I would go to their homes, and these fabulous homes up there. And they had bare rugs and all that kind of stuff. And yes, the music room is down to the left. And this was in somebody's house. Oh my gosh. So I was there for a day teaching in the school system. And then I taught 1 day and for the private students. And they found out I had an athletic background. So they said, oh, we have a baseball team. Can you help us out there? So I did that for a while too. So I really had a good time there at that particular school. But then coming back to the shore area, I went to Atlantic Highlands. Anybody from Atlantic Highlands? I taught there for a year. They started me out with a day and a half. And Eatontown, I was there for 2 days and a half. So I had 4 days. Oh, that was fine. But before the year was out, I had 2 days in Atlantic Highlands and 3 days in Eatontown. And the next year after that, Eatontown said, you're not going anywhere. So I was there in Eatontown for 6 years. 6 years. And so that 6 years, around still in September, school was starting, and Frank was getting a little bit older and a little weary about the job and didn't want to do the football season. So Joe Zack said, hey, I want you to come to Asbury Park. So I said, oh, it sounds good. Well, I want you to be the assistant to Frank Bryan. I said, well, I'm already in charge of the school system here in Eatontown, so I'm not moving unless you have a clear opening. So before the year was out, the superintendent of Eatontown called me in the office. He said, Asbury needs you right now, and we're going to release you within 30 days to go to Asbury. So I went to Asbury in 1968, and in October, and we had a football game that weekend. So I had to get ready real quick, but I had a great time, and some tremendous youngsters. And I was there when Gladstone came through, and he was just tremendous. We had a large jazz ensemble, and we played all over the place and had a great time. So I'm going to turn this over to Gladstone. Gladstone.
Thank you all. As being the young whippersnapper on the team or something like that. Anyway, the point is that in the early 70s and so forth, with Dorian had come to Asbury, being in grade school and being a product of the Asbury Park music program at that point. Yes, I had private lessons and I had started playing the piano at the age of 7, 6 and a half, 7. I begged my parents for lessons. I wanted to play the piano. I really did. Mom played, my father sang, and I took lessons from Mrs. Elizabeth Yeager Bell, who was a graduate of Juilliard and so forth. And over the years, I was lucky and blessed to have a lot of great teachers, Dorian included, but also a lot of great piano teachers. And as things progressed, you know, it was we laugh about your story when you had to find something that mom didn't. All right. Well, here's one for you. My brother played clarinet. All right, made all-state clarinet, Asbury, and so forth and so on. Anyway, so I absolutely adored Louis Armstrong. I couldn't play the trumpet to save my life. Anyway, so things went along. Mom said after a year, all right, that's wonderful. 4th grade, you've tried it, and now you're going to play something else. So my brother played clarinet, so now I played the clarinet. So that's how it went, you know, and Mom read music and so forth, so she helped us, and consequently we got through this. And things went on, and keyboard-wise, piano-wise, things were wonderful. And in those days, Asbury Park, the school system, had a summer band program that you probably don't find very often anymore, unfortunately. But one of the highlights of that program was that we would, at the end of the summer season, we would give a concert. And the concerts were always held on the front lawn of the Asbury Park High School. All right, and that elevated area. So can you imagine having 30, 35 kids, 40 kids, you know, out there open air back in the day, doing what we did best, which was music, you know. You know, kids today worry about being nerds. Yeah, I guess we were all nerds, because we were the ones that loved to play, you know. You couldn't find us, what do you mean he's not in class? He's at the band, he's in the band room, you know. But many, many times, and through the efforts of a lot of great guidance at that time, you really got to see some of the beauty of Asbury Park and the music program and the music heritage through the years, you know. So, yeah, just a thought. Please.
It's excellent. You're so accurate about things. I'm curious when you talked about this scene and all these venues that were there. I mean, that's a lot of venues. That's more than obviously are in Asbury Park now, and concentrated in that one little area that you're talking about. Curious, you know, you obviously now you were going through the 70s when it was happening on the east side as well. What was going on? People were going there to party. People were going there to have fun. Was it? You know, tell me a little bit about, you know, what the feeling was there. What was?
You know about the 70s, the 30s? I mean, the 40s?
Yeah, from the 40s.
From the 40s.
Yeah.
In the 40s, in most of those clubs, there was always a set of drums. There was always a piano. And oftentimes, some of the local musicians, the older musicians, would come into the club, fill up a few beers, and then sit down and start jamming. They'd be jamming in this club, and other musicians would be jamming in another club. And those of us who were young, we would just go and listen to these older musicians, seeing how they do this, how they play this particular lick, how they make certain runs with their instruments, and so forth and so on. So they had music going on even in the afternoon. So those of us who were young and trying to learn how to play like these older musicians, we would go there and just soaking up like a sponge. But when the nighttime came, these places came alive. They usually had groups, sometimes 3 pieces, sometimes 4 pieces, sometimes 5 pieces, sometimes even larger. I remember when I was quite young, there used to be a government program called the WPA program. I don't recall what WPA stood for, but I'm sure some of you have heard of the CC camps they had years ago to help underprivileged or people who were not doing too well financially. The government stepped in with these programs to help young people get ahead. Well, there was a band that the government featured in Asbury Park called the WPA Band. And it was stocked with the best musicians in the Asbury Park area. And I can, their names are not important because if I mention their names to you guys, it wouldn't mean anything. But I can tell you that that band was just as good, in my opinion, as the guys were playing up on Broadway. I learned so much from watching and listening to these fellas rehearse and play their gigs. And so the clubs, you could go into one club, go out of that club and go right into the next club. I can remember playing at the Asbury Park Elks. I can remember playing there at a gig with, I was playing with the organ trio. And I remember a young man to my left came and stood, Dorian Parreott, came and listened to us play a set or two. When I took intermission, I walked out of the Elks Club, I walked around the corner, I caught the guys playing at the Turf Club. I stayed there for about 5 minutes. Then I went to the Capitol, stayed there about 5 minutes. There was 3 music venues within walking distance, within less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes. And all those places were packed. And not only that, the gentlemen were gentlemen. The men wore hats. When the ladies walked by, they would tip their hats to the ladies. If they had a few drinks, and a lady walked by, oh, don't say a bad word. If they walked them by one of the churches on Springwood Avenue, the worst drunk would straighten up when he got to the church. That's the way Springwood Avenue was. There was so much respect. Young guys could go there, no problem. Ladies could go there with no problem. And I'd like to mention one thing. Cuba's nightclub. Cuba's nightclub was like being in New York City. They had a bar in the front and a nightclub in the back. And they had top entertainment. They used to come in the back. Well, I was playing in a group called the Squires of Rhythm. We were all young guys around 16, 17 years old. And we had to have special permission from our parents to even play there. But we played in the back. And I can remember many of our parents coming. And limousines would be coming from Deal, Avon, ladies with their furs, gentlemen with their tux on, coming in the back of Cuba's because that's where the action was. And everybody had a grand time. So it was more community back in the 40s and 50s than there is today. I'll pass it on you.
Second that motion because that was a theme. Everybody knew everybody else. And so when you walk down the street, people knew your name, they knew your family, and they respected that particular thing. Throughout the jazz scene, most of the music on the West Side was jazz. It was not rock and roll. And that was the difference in those particular times. You know, rock and roll was the little kids on the side who used to play that out on their records and stuff like that. But there weren't a whole lot of bands playing rock and roll at that particular time. Mostly jazz. The West Side Community Center used to have a marching band that played for parades in Asbury Park, and it used to be huge. It used to really fill Springwood Avenue up. Also, there was a band up in Neptune. This one fellow used to conduct, we learned how to read the music. We did a lot of marches and things of this sort. So we were exposed by the older musicians in that area. So during my time, I was, around 50s and 54s. We were just playing jazz and Latin music, and we were playing in a couple other clubs in Asbury Park. I think it was Molina's, and that was was quite an experience because a lot of the jazz musicians didn't go across town. They stayed on Asbury, on the Springwood Avenue side. But I was able to go and play on Main Street and a couple of clubs over there. So really had a good time. And Gladstone, was there much more going on after that?
Well, yeah, there's plenty happening. But even before we get to that, one of the things that I wanted to point out, since you were so kind to mention that I'm an organist, is that one of the things that we always, and you always found in the bars years and years ago, people talk about a piano here, a piano there. You went in a black bar or a bar on Springwood Avenue, and you always found a B3 in the corner. There was always a Hammond B3. All right. Now, why is the B3 so significant? Well, that's Jimmy Smith's axe. That's the sound that became the organ trio. You talk about, what was the sound, what was really going on. That organ was very different to what we may know of as organs today, or what we think of as organs, church organs, windblown pipe organs. That's a whole other story. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, always, every club that you mentioned, Cliff, had a B3, all right? So, consequently, there was always the possibility of a jam session exploding at any point. All you needed was a piano player, an organist that knew how to, as they like to say, kick the bass, and you were off and running, So those things. And that, until Springwood Avenue really started to die, you always found the organ there, and it was always ready to go.
That's interesting because Hammond B3 is still the most emulated sound that's out there. It's still such a popular sound. Of course, a staple in my space in the recording studio, and that's very interesting to me. The other thing that you just brought up, obviously we're seeing some rumblings on the west side of Asbury Park again. And there's this, some of this, like the Springwood Center, this multi-use building. It's one of the first major structures to be built right there in Springwood. Yep. And there's something called the JAMS project that has recently come to my attention, which is part of the redevelopment plan that's going on, the revitalization plan of Springwood Avenue, where they have plans, the same group, the Interfaith Neighbors group, and the same collection of people who are going to bring JAMS, which is jazz, arts, music, and sciences, which I think is another seed to pop in here, where they're talking about bringing a theater, a boutique hotel possibly, a music technology space, and a performance space, which again, there's a multi-million-dollar projects now that the city's trying to bring in. And that's something that everyone's hoping to be real and do something special there. But the one place that I see right now that still is alive, so I have a building it's on lake, so Springwood basically turns into lake. And, on that side, like when we first opened our doors, which was just about a year ago, very strong enrollment, people coming in, excited to come to Asbury Park and take music lessons. And no kids from Asbury Park came in, which was, that was really hard for us because, I'm from the area, and as a teenager, I played every week in the clubs, and that's all I did. And we decided that we need to go and find people to come to our school. And the place where we had the most success were in really the most kids now that we have, we got them from the churches. we went in and we spoke to people at the churches, and wow, what a scene. That still happens, and like you said, there was always music in the church, and still the best musicians. So the guys that I hire when I'm looking for the A guys in the recording studio are all church guys, like yourself, music directors, and it's amazing how powerful that's been, and to realize that that's such a staple, and that's something that's still alive in Asbury Park. And alive in many ways, the little guys that come in and will sit at the organ who are 10, 11 years old. And then they'll walk over to the bass and they'll pick the bass up, and they're, again, coming from that cloth. And that's exciting for me as trying to be an educator here. And I think that maybe you can give us a little bit of that experience. Tell me a little bit about playing in church. First of all, you still play in church, Gladstone, like you said. Is everyone else still playing in church?
Still playing in church.
I play in church now more than I do anyplace else.
Yeah, very true. One of the things that is, interesting about that very scene, in the fact that you have numerous church choirs and other choirs, not only church choirs, but choirs where people will get together under the tutelage of some of us that have been there a long time, but really love what it is that we're doing, and this, if we can indeed inspire someone to be able to, in your case, say, yeah, can I play the bass? Or, maybe we should add a bass to this. How do we go about that? Or someone gets indeed, has an idea that they want to play the organ, Well, all of a sudden, that B3 that was playing Misty on Saturday night is playing Near My God to Thee Sunday morning. Anyway, let's not go through. But it's true. It's true, because that's the heart of today's gospel sound, the B3, and that's very different to the Eurocentric pipe organ where you're expecting to hear the toccata and fugue. You can play the toccata and fugue on a B3. It may not sound exactly like what you think it's going to sound like, but of course, you get to play the instrument. But inspiring people and being able to get them to draw that true goodness deep down, I think the church has done that well, and many people indeed, to this day, still get their roots from the church and so forth.
Right. That's excellent. And jobs. It's a great way to get some work. The guys that I know that are doing it, they have jobs. And I think that's important. That there is some, and I'm looking for the success for these musicians. I'm looking for a place for them to have work and be successful. And education and in church, there's some really great jobs. And you obviously have had these excellent mentors. And you've been excellent mentors. And that's also something that I'd love to hear about. How important was that for you? You hear a little bit of it, but really, how important, and what's next? What do you do after having that impression and hearing that music and having great mentors? How do you put that out to the world?
Okay, having mentors is one of the greatest things. You have somebody to look up to, and someone to guide you into the direction that you would like to go. In the churches, I do a lot of gospel programs in the afternoon, doing the church services, and I play at various churches. I played at the St. George's Church in Rumson. I play a lot in Trinity Church in Asbury Park, and we do gospel afternoons, gospel services. And that's basically where the jobs are. My son is a music teacher also, and he does brass ensembles, does mass. He plays in New York and all over Pennsylvania. But that's where the jobs are now. There's not too many opportunities to play for special parties like we used to play. They used to have house parties, 2 or 3 musicians used to play. But the church is open to the idea that musicians can be a part of the service. And that's what we do. We play the service, and then we add to the service by adding a little different flavor to the music. We up-tempo some of the gospel tunes, and that's, it's very interesting, and a lot of the parishioners enjoy that. We sing the songs of the church, and we jazz them up a little bit, and it makes it very exciting to perform there. Cliff and I used to play a lot of duets in the church in St. Stephen's, and we just had a good time. I started out with this little green book and wrote some parts for everybody, and the harmonies were there, and that's the kind of thing that's exciting. And we're hoping to bring some of these young people into the program, and that's probably the hardest thing to do in Asbury Park, is to find some youngsters to work with them. And I think the Asbury Park Musical Heritage Foundation is working on that as I speak. They are doing a program at the Boys and Girls Club in Asbury Park dealing with jazz and youngsters learning the various musical instruments, clarinets, flutes, drums, trumpet, saxophone.
I just want to make just one comment about church music. Like I said earlier, my mother was a music teacher, and I remember she used to be the organist for the Mount Carmel Catholic Church when it was on the corner of Springwood and Ridge Avenue, and then also on Bangs Avenue. There used to be another part of the Catholic Church there on Bangs Avenue. The church service was downstairs under, where the church is now on the corner? Well, anyway, one thing I want to say about being in church and church music. My mother had my brother and I singing in a choir in a Catholic church. And she had us singing in Latin. And I didn't know a word that I didn't understand anything that I was singing. I knew the notes, but the verbiage, I had no idea exactly what we were doing. She had us doing that. But I remember one time at the Catholic church on Bangs Avenue, I see a few gray hairs around here beside my own, so some of you here might remember this person. But my brother and I were singing at the Catholic church on Bangs Avenue, and the prize fighter by the name of Primo Canera. Anybody remember that name? Primo Canera? Okay, I got one over here, I got one over here, I got one here. And Primo Canera, he came into the church service. He was a mountain of a guy. Oh, he was so huge. And this was back in the Joe Louis era and the Primo Canera era. And when I saw this guy, I said, how did Joe Louis ever knock this guy down? This guy was, wow. But anyway, I want to say this, that being a saxophone player, playing in church became a challenge back in the day. Because back in the day, some churches would bring a guitar in, and then maybe they'd bring a drummer in. But a horn player, not in church. I can remember playing at church in Long Branch, or bringing my horn there to play. And I took my instrument out, and this deacon looked at me and he said, oh, that's just too much. That's just too much. I said, oh my goodness. So, but anyway, my mother was there and she was the head of the program, so I had to play anyway. But thank goodness, as the years went by, that taboo about not having instruments in church went by the wayside, because in the book of Psalms, I think in the 150th Psalm, it says praise God with the cymbals and the harp, the lyre, the whole 9 yards. So I never felt out of place, but they did. But anyway, it was quite an experience to me to play in church.
That's excellent.
And nowadays, the wonderful thing about this is that you can truly incorporate this, into the service. Being organist and choir master for an Episcopal church, having taught in numerous Catholic schools, okay, where, in Catholic school and for many years in the Episcopal church, you had to make sure you had both feet in the same shoe, otherwise you were in trouble. And it's very different now. As far as church music goes. And they're also, thank God for small favors, writing things for horns and writing things for other instruments other than trumpet. It's acceptable to have a horn in church on Easter Sunday at 6 o'clock. Any other time, it wasn't accepted. But that's, of course, not true. And now it is, turning around and so forth and so on. And that's nice to see, And yes, the saxophone is always welcome.
So there's, I think about this thing, music, and obviously we all are fans of this thing called music. And when we talk about Asbury Park today, their tagline is that now the music city. They're really, and you said now we have the Asbury Park Musical Heritage Foundation, and we're looking to music to help us, to connect this east side and west side, and to help redevelop. And we know that. We all believe that. We know that it's connected us. And that's changed lives, and so many lives. You just mentioned the Asbury Park Musical Heritage Foundation. And to let you in on a little secret that I just heard is the ex-city manager, Terry Reedy, just became the chair of that organization. And you see this momentum, and you see that, like this center that they're talking about opening, this JAMS project, that we're looking to music. So, like I said, we went to the church and got kids to come in, and we went to the Asbury Park Musical Heritage Foundation and asked them to help us raise money. And that has been amazing, because in this first year, we took in some young children who never played, and came in and started to take lessons with us, and now are playing in church, playing at our academy, and that's their thing. They love it. That's their thing. And I think there's a lot of possibility here, and I think, wow, we need to strengthen that. We need to get behind that, and the educators here know that. There's a successful charter school in Asbury Park, Hope Charter, Hope Academy, and it's a lottery to get in, and it's very competitive, and they have no music program. And I met with a wonderful woman, Denise Rodriguez, and she'd written, found 16 grants for this Asbury Park charter school last year. And I said, how is there no music program? And she said, well, you can't get grants unless you have an existing music program. And that is something now that small projects like that can change the lives of so many people in Asbury Park, but that we need that support. And obviously people here understand that. But we need to support that, and you are all such proof of, what wonderful things music can do. I mean, which distinguished gentlemen, I feel, so honored to be here with you, and think about how many people that you've helped Just very, very, very moving for us. I do want to ask you at some point soon, we want to get the audience involved to prepare your questions. But I want to ask you about some more about your current gigs and maybe some of the fun stuff. Maybe you could tell me about your gigs and what you're doing, where you're playing. It's good to know you're still working, by the way.
You know, Gladstone is working all the time. He's there every week. I think there's a flyer out there on April the 27th. We'll be at Gladstone's church on the 27th in Asbury Park, and that's going to be at 3:30. Tickets are only $5. The AllStar Jazz Ensemble is going to perform. Gladstone is going to be on a keyboard, and I'm going to be playing a little saxophone. Stanton Davis is on trumpet. Wilbert Whitterman is on trumpet. Desi Norman plays fives and pans. Benny Correo on guitar, and Bobby Boyd on drums. And we'll be playing music from all of the various genres of music, like George Gershwin's tunes, Hoagie Carmichael, Benny Golson, Carlos Jobim, Lee Morgan, Count Basie. All of these names should be familiar to you. Sonny Rollins, Duke Ellington, Chuck Mangione, George Grover Washington, Fats Waller, Earl Garner, and Miles Davis and Bobby Montgomery. Those are just some of the names that will be performing. And it's going to be an exciting evening. So if you're in the area, please come out. It's going to be a great thing. We are fundraising for the Asbury Park Musical Heritage Foundation. So it's going to help them to start programs and support Jon with the youngsters with instruments and lessons for youngsters of Asbury Park. I also play all over the place. I was in Browns Mills about a couple of months ago playing a event of gospel music and jazz combination. I do a lot of teen arts festivals throughout the area, and there we see a tremendous amount of youngsters and a talent second to none performing. Dr. Heim, if you stand up, he is the owner of the teen arts.
I am
It's
standing.
called, he is standing. And I've been working with him for several years, and he just does a tremendous job. The youngsters come and perform, and they are being adjudicated, and then they have an opportunity to play and get feedback from the judges. And then when they leave there, they go to Great Adventures for a fun time in the afternoon. We used to do that at Asbury Park High School, and I've taken the youngsters to Canada twice. I've gone to Florida twice on a bus ride. It was something else, and we've been to Virginia, we've been to Washington. When I was in Eatontown, we went to Washington every year with all of the 8th graders, and just an opportunity. And music does so much for youngsters. And if you look around and listen to people in high places, if they've had a musical background, they've been influenced through the music that they've had in the past. Youngsters in the music program are generally the top youngsters in your schools, and it's been proven and it's been tested that they score well, they know how to participate with others, and music brings them together. They can also be outstanding speakers because they're performing as individual performers. It just gives them a great opportunity to grow, not only as a musician, but as an all-around student. So music does tremendous amount of things for young people.
I was just sitting here thinking, I don't play as often as I used to play, all over the place. And I had kind of promised my wife that I would kind of slow down and spend more time, particularly on the weekends. That's when that's when we're mostly busy, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I used to be playing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all the time. So now, if you want to hear Cliff Johnson playing today, you'll probably find me at a church, because I've been asked to play so many different churches anyway here lately. And so that's what I've been kind of concentrating on. But I want to share a story with you. Dorian will remember this when I bring it to his attention. Dorian and I were playing at, I think, the Clearwater Festival in Asbury Park a few summers ago. And it was an outside venue where we were at a park across from the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park. And this Clearwater Festival took up this whole park area, and they had different entertainment going on in different places. So Dorian and I were playing with this, as an organ trio. And, well, it was a keyboard, in this case. It was a keyboard. Myself and Dorian was on drums. We were playing, and we had a nice crowd of people, and they were just into what we were playing and applauding and everything. And all of a sudden, everybody disappeared. Where did everybody go? Bruce Springsteen showed up at one of the other venues out there, and everybody left us and went over to hear Bruce Springsteen. So that was funny. But actually, most of the playing I've done in the last few years has been with Dorian and many of his groups. We've done a number of jazz Vesper services where we take Christian music and put a little jazz spin on it, and it's been very well received, and I enjoyed all those gigs. But like I say, you're going to catch Cliff Johnson today. You'll probably find me in church.
Gladstone.
Well,
Can we get you up in the front here?
get me up front.
Can we get you in the front here? Maybe she'll put you to work right now.
You're going to put me to work.
Can we put him to work? Let's hear it for him. Come on.
I guess they don't have to go. Well, where you might find me playing is almost anywhere, and we know that I'll be at St. Augustine's on Sunday morning. For those of you that aren't doing anything around 9, you know where to find me. Anyway, but I'm the house musician down at Manasquan River Golf Club, and I'm also one of the staff pianists at the Breakers. You'll find me during the summer, during season, at the Breakers most times. Manasquan River is a private club, but I know you know somebody. It's okay. You know. And I would hope that if you get a chance, come on down. For many years, I conducted the downtown glee club out of Manhattan. And so sooner or later, you know, the New York ride, it kind of wears on you. But I will be with Sandy Sasso, as a matter of fact, Saturday night. That's a local name. We will be at 55 Bar, which is Christopher and 7th. So we have the early show, so if you're up in the city, come on by, you know. So, you really want me to play this? All right. Well, oh, you did bring it. All right. What would you like? All right. Well, all right. We can do that. I'll do this one, and then you think about that one. Okay. So while we're rehearsing, okay. One of the tunes that I like to do, and from time to time I get to do it. I don't believe it's a Gershwin tune, but it goes back a few years. You may know it, and it goes like this. When two lovers meet in Mayfair, so the legend says, songbirds sing, winter turns to spring, and if we're lucky it won't snow. Every winding road in Mayfair falls beneath that spell. I know such enchantment can be, 'cause it happened one evening. That certain spot, the night we met, there was magic abroad in the air. There were angels dining at the Ritz, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. I may be right, I may be wrong, I'm perfectly willing to swear that as we stood and kissed goodnight, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. A moon that lingered over London town, for troubled moon, he wore a frown. How could you know you two were so in love? The whole darn world is upside down. The streets of town were paved with gold. It was such a romantic affair that as we stood and kissed goodnight, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. I knew 'cause I was there that night in Berkeley Square. Okay, we can put that back. You don't want to introduce this? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I just.
This is what happens tonight.
Well, hello, yes, darling. Well, hello, darling. It's so nice to have you back where you belong. Yeah, you're looking swell, darling. I can tell, darling. You're still glowing, you're still growing. Yes, you're growing strong.
we've gone a little over, but we'd like to get a few questions if you have any. Take a few questions. Anyone?
Well, I'd like to know more about why the church objected to a horn. Didn't they ever hear Gabriel?
But he blew the trumpet. He blew the trumpet.
One of the questions I have, I don't know how any of you would answer this, but jazz is truly American-born by black musicians out of Louisiana. Louis Armstrong, one of the first ones to bring it up. And it is truly an American form of music. And then you had guys like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk. They were good here, but if they wanted to make money, they had to go to Paris. What happened? Why didn't jazz take here?
That's a tough question. What happens is that the American scene was strictly more dancing, big bands, rock type of feeling. But when you go to Europe, it's like unbelievable. Thousands of people come out and perform. And what is why is that so? I just do not have the support as they used to back in the 40s. Back in the 40s, the clubs used to be jam-packed, loaded. And as it moved on up, the musicians had to go out of the country in order to make money and be able to stay alive. Duke Ellington did the same thing. I was in the South for 7 years. And we saw Louis Armstrong, we saw Duke Ellington and Count Basie all came down in that area. But they were hip-hopping from one state to another country, and that's how they made their music.
So you think Big Band pushed it out?
Big band pushed it out.
Not pushed it out completely, but that's what the American people sort of took to at that time.
That's a very interesting question you asked. But I think because it is homegrown, it wasn't appreciated in the United States the way it was overseas. I know that, just taking a personal experience, being a local musician, sometimes people say, well, that's just Cliff Johnson playing, because he's from Asbury Park. But Cliff Johnson goes to Newark and plays. He's wow, great. It's the same thing, I think, with musicians that were Louis Armstrong. You mentioned Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and all those guys. They wound up going to Europe because they were appreciated there. In the States, the only people who really appreciated them were just the jazz aficionados and the other jazz musicians, but the general public did not. So when they went to Europe, they were treated like royalty, and a lot of them really didn't want to come back. I think that's one of the true.
Yeah. One other thing I just wanted to say, jazz in those early days was not acceptable to most of the American people because they couldn't understand it. People would sing a song, but you would not want to listen to that all night long. And that's what the people were saying. We want to hear that's more pleasing to the ear. And they sort of judge the music by the ears.
Yeah, but Ella Fitzgerald was the one that invented scat. She forgot the words one day.
That's very true. That's very true. The other thing that you might want to consider is that music was back in the 30s and the 20s, 30s, and 40s and so forth, before the days of MTV. How was music popularized? On stage shows, via the stage. Okay, and you didn't have a lot of jazz music being performed in the middle of Cole Porter's whatever show, and to this day, the American Songbook is that of those stage shows, the tunes that we know, that people love to dance to, that hum and know the words to, that can actually sing a melody and recall a melody, are from those days, that era when it was the stage show that made the song popular. You left humming that tune, and that's how it came out.
just finished reading a book, Asbury Park, A West Side Story,
Mm-hmm.
and it was surprising that Madonna, the lady that wrote the book, years ago when we were kids, we went to Big Bill's, and we went to the Orchid Lounge, you know, and we went to a lot, not a lot of the places, but a couple of them, right, on Springwood Avenue. And it was never stressed in the book that actually the people that went to the nightclubs, it was very integrated. There were probably as many white people as there were black people in these clubs. And it was the music that brought them together. And there was no problem with integration in these clubs. And the book never really stressed that. She doesn't really bring that out. But I think a lot of people don't realize that the clubs and Asbury Park.
Madonna was Joe Carter's daughter, the photographer's daughter. And there were most of the things that she compiled in that book. It was just material that she put together, that her pictures that her father had taken during his heyday. But she wasn't really out there on the scene herself to really see what you're talking about, the integration, the getting along with everybody gathering together. She wasn't a part of that. And a lot of the history of that book could have been so much greater had she consulted with some of the musicians, because we could have given her a lot of the insight, some of the things that you're speaking of just now.
Yeah, because she mentioned a lot of the clubs, Cubas and
Yes, she mentioned
all of them.
She did.
Big Bill's and not the Orchid Lounge, but Cubas and all the other ones. She mentioned all of those, but never really went into the clientele that they catered to. Also, Mr. Pryor, I went to Winnemasset Grammar School and Asbury Park High School. I graduated in '61 at Asbury Park High School. But when we were in 7th grade, Mr. Pryor from Asbury Park High School brought the big band into our auditorium. And they had a concert there. And I tell you, he knocked everybody out. Those kids were so good. We couldn't believe they were kids. They were really talented. He taught them well, those kids. And that was a great experience. And I bet it led a lot of kids to go into music because of that.
Yeah. Well, he was one of my mentors, and that's the reason why I went into it, because of his exposure to that. And we played early on when I first got into high school in 1950. Where's Paul at? Back in 1950, we had an orchestra at Asbury Park High School, and then we had a band. I played French horn then, way away from the saxophone and the drums. But he was instrumental, and we started a little jazz band, and that was then accepted. So it was kind of difficult to get it started, and he was strictly a classical guy. But he exposed us to the music and taught us how to read, and that's how we got into it. It was very interesting. Okay.
We have time for one more question.
First of all, this has been a fabulous evening, and I would like to thank especially our three distinguished panelists for sharing your memories. Sharing your memories of the West Side music. I'm with the Asbury Park Historical Society, and we are planning a major exhibit for January of 2015 in connection with the Light of Day Foundation on the West Side music and Springwood Avenue and all of it was going on there. We're going to have a lot of photographs and memorabilia and stuff, and certainly we would welcome the three of you to help us and contribute and consult with us on something like this. I have a couple of quick questions, just two. The first one is basically the mainstream white newspaper West Side music scene as much as they should. How did word get out as to who was playing where, and was it just such a tight-knit community people knew, or was there a way of finding out who was playing in which clubs?
Yeah, well, I would think that it really started in the churches and the people who ventured out to those clubs. They talked to other people, so with word of mouth was very strong. There was also a newspaper there.
Back in the day, I keep saying back in the day, but years ago when they used to have affairs, the way they used to publicize these affairs, they would get these big placards. These placards, they would go around all the various business establishments, and they'd put these placards in the windows of these businesses, and they would have tickets at various strategic locations. But mostly it was because of that type of advertising, putting signs in windows, and that's how people knew what was going on where and when.
And my second quick question is, when major black artists would appear in Asbury Park back in the 40s and 50s and things, what were the big establishments that they would play in? I noticed you didn't mention the Armory, and I know that Lunsford played the Armory, and Billy Eckstein and Dizzy Gillespie played the Armory. So.
You're very right about that. The Armory housed many of the great bands. Like you mentioned Jimmy Lunsford. I remember seeing Billy Eckstein there myself. I don't know why they stopped having those bands coming to the Armory, but I guess like everything else, big bands kind of died out anyway, Charles. But the convention hall also in Asbury Park used to bring big bands, jazz bands, to Asbury Park also.
I know Ella played the convention. Ella Fitzgerald played convention hall in the 30s, late 30s, I think.
Yes, she did. She did.
The cotillion, the black debutantes that came to Asbury Park, and they brought a lot of large bands to that area. So they were playing at the convention hall at that time. So that was one of the main thrusts in exposing a lot of the people to that area, to Asbury Park. I want to also mention tonight that the Asbury Park Hall of Fame, Ira, would you stand, Ira? Ira is one of the chairperson of that group, and they're having, what's the year on that, Ira?
Well, we take all different years, but it's May 22nd at the Berkeley Carteret. We're inducting about 13 people this year. 13
people are going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame.
And the man I'm pointing at is one of the members of the Hall. He's been inducted to the Hall of Fame in Asbury Park.
So, if you're in the area, one of our graduates from Asbury Park in 1954, Marjorie Moore, is going to be there. Freeman, I think her last name is now, they keep changing, I can't keep up with them. But we'll be there with a jazz trio, and I think it's May the 14th, 16th? 16th, yeah, May the 16th. So we'll be there from 6 to 8, and then there's a great big affair that follows there. But it's very, very nice, supportive.
I'll tell you one thing. We have a fellow who's in my class in high school, and he played in the band in Asbury Park High School. His name was Robert Watt. Robert Watt was a French horn player at Asbury Park High School. And Robert Watt became the first African-American, French horn player in the Los Angeles Symphony Orchestra. First one. Yeah.
Bobby Watt is in California now.
He's in California now.
He was my house guest 3 months ago. He and his other two brothers and one of his sisters, because his father was a very dear friend of mine. His father played trumpet. But Bobby and I stayed in contact all the time. I want to mention Bobby too. I'm glad you mentioned him, because Bobby came out of the Asbury Park Village. And he wound up playing in the Symphony Orchestra of San Francisco. I believe it was San Francisco. Los Angeles, thank you, Los Angeles. So he had really, we were so proud of what he did. I remember when he was growing up with my son, and they were a part of the West Side Community marching band. And I can remember Bobby Watt playing the bugle, and he practiced all the time. My son wouldn't, but he did. And he continued on, and now he has retired. He's retired now, but he is a real Asbury Park success story.
anyone to stop this. Clearly, I think we could stay for hours and hours. I just want to say how much we appreciate having these distinguished musicians here to share with us their memories. And Jon taking time out, he's going home to pack to go to the South by Southwest Music Festival, leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning, but he found time to come here. I just have to tell you, it warms my heart to see all these people. I have a brother who's a jazz musician, and he explained to me the difference between rock and jazz. A rock musician plays 4 chords for thousands of people. A jazz musician plays thousands of chords for 4 people. Wrong tonight. So we have some memorabilia that the gentlemen have brought to share with you. We have delicious homemade goodies in the back of the room. Please enjoy yourself. Come up and meet these gentlemen. It's well worth the time.